Hey there everyone, and welcome to another episode of DnD Horror Stories. In today's video, we have a tale about a Dungeons & Dragons game that will make you cringe, a story about a DM accidentally causing a TPK, and more. But before we get into the stories, I ask that if you aren't already, consider clicking subscribe and the bell to be notified whenever a new video comes out. If not for me, then do it for Lucky, the like and comment kitty. But with that said, let's get into these stories. Furry does fetish at DnD. Submitted to the channel via Twitter by Anonymous. Hey there Doge. First I wanted to say that I'm a big fan of the channel and all your kitties. I have a story that I thought you would like to put in one of your videos, and oh boy, it is a doozy. I would also like for my Twitter name to be anonymous. So first, I have to state that I am a furry, and I know the stigma that comes with that. I first would just like to say that most people in the fandom aren't like the people you hear about in all the stories, but unfortunately, there are some, and this story is about such furries. So, back in 2018, a few friends and I decided to all meet up and attend one of the biggest and most popular furry conventions located in Pennsylvania, known as Anthrocon. Overall, the experience was pretty great, and I made a bunch of new friends there that I still talk to this day. Though, one day, I was walking around the dealer's den, where a bunch of other furries sell their wares, like t-shirts and such, and I saw someone there with a Critical Role shirt on, so I mentioned that I enjoyed the show. He seemed a little surprised, as Critical Role isn't the powerhouse back then that it is today, so we got to talking. We will call him Critter moving forward. So, after talking for a bit, Critter told me that he and a few of his friends were going to run a one-shot in one of his friends' rooms located at the Con Hotel, and after clearing it with the person running it, he invited me to join. Now, I hadn't played in years since high school, and the allure to play again, even if it's a one-shot with strangers, was too great to resist. So, Critter pulled out a notepad from his pack, wrote down the room number and time, and the plan was set in motion. So I went about the rest of my day, informed my roomies what my plans were and where I would be, can never be too careful. And when 10 PM rolled around, I made my way to the crowded elevator and up to the room. Now, when I got to the room, I knocked on the door and a guy answered. I told him who I was, that Critter had invited me to the one-shot, and I was led into the room, which I have to say was much bigger and nicer than the room that I was staying in. It had a large living space with a bed, and even a side room with another bed. As I walked in, everything seemed pretty normal. Well, normal for a hotel room at a furry convention. There was various bottles of alcohol on a desk, random luggage laying around, and some fursuits bundled up in various places. At the center of the room, there was a table with a white grid mat for drawing maps, with Critter and 3 others seated around it, looking ready to go. Aside from Critter, here's the rest of the cast of this story, with made-up names of course. There was Nick, a dude with long dyed pink hair wearing a Zootopia t-shirt, and the host of the game. Fluffy, a dude wearing a neon green fursuit without the head, and had a lanyard with various badges of his character hanging off of it. This will be important later. And Drunk, a guy that had been obviously drinking a bit already, but surprisingly not the subject of this horror story, and was actually a really good role player. We all made introductions. I was told that I was welcome to any drinks I wanted, and we were all given our character sheets, as they were all pre-made, which is totally fine for a one-shot. Like I said, I was just happy to meet other furries that were into D&D. The game is pretty standard. Nick is the DM, Fluffy is playing Bard, Drunk is the fighter, and I was given the cleric. About an hour goes by, and we do the standard meet in a tavern, get a quest, and go to a cave to clear it of some gnolls. I figured that since I'm staying in the same hotel, that I would take them up on the offer for drinks, since everyone else was partaking, and everyone was having a blast. Fluffy kept wearing his fursuit, which isn't odd at a furry convention, plus they had the AC blasting, so it wouldn't be that hot wearing it. At one point, I get a closer look at his character art on his badges, and I noticed the detail that in a few of them, his fursona was depicted wearing a diaper. Now, I know that baby furs are a thing, but try not to judge people, so I just shrug it off. But here's where things get weird. During the game, everyone is drinking, and I and the others have all excused ourselves to use the bathroom a few times, though I begin to notice that Fluffy has not got up once. Then, at one point, I start to smell something. At first, I thought that perhaps someone just let one rip, and it would dissipate after a few minutes. Though, it didn't go away. The smell just got stronger. Suddenly, Nick looks over to Fluffy, and I shit you not, says to him, "Uh-oh, looks like someone needs a diaper change." He then looks at us and states that they will be right back, and then takes Fluffy over into the other room and shuts the door. I am dumbfounded. This dude was wearing a diaper under his fursuit this whole time, and that would explain why he hadn't used the bathroom during the 2 hours of gaming and drinking. I could do nothing but sit there in silent shock and look over to Critter, who looked just as shocked as I did. Then Drunk piped up and said, "Man, I told them not to do that crap during the game. I'm going to have a talk with them tomorrow. Sorry you had to be here for that." I kinda just wanted to thank them for their time and just leave right there. But we were approaching the end of the game, so I just stuck around to finish it out after Nick and Fluffy got back after his change. I'm still friends with Critter and currently play with his group on Roll20, but needless to say, I don't talk to the others from that game. Occasionally, the whole ordeal comes up in conversation, and we just laugh about it now. I don't care what people do in their own privacy, but for God's sake, don't partake in your fetish around people who don't consent to being around it, especially when meeting them for the first time. TLDR, meet people at a furry convention that play D&D, get invited to a one-shot, then 2 of the players partake in a diaper fetish in the presence of unknowing participants. Well, that situation certainly sounded shitty. Usually, I read stories about that guys just trying to inject their fetish into the roleplay of games, not ones that actually do it outside of the game. I'm surprised that OP powered through to the end of the game after that. But hey, at least they made a new friend, and was able to get back into D&D through Critter's group. Though, now I have to Google search images to make a thumbnail for the video, so that should be interesting.
2 hours later.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Let's just move on. How I Got My First TPK by Reddit user Zach the Master. I fucked up yesterday. It was session 6 of my first campaign, a campaign where the party is transported into Ravenloft. I decided to run the Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft adventure, The House of Lament, as an introduction to the setting, as the players had never played in the Ravenloft setting before. 2 things about the house. 1. It's an adventure designed for level 1 to 3 parties, while my players were at level 5, so I decided to increase the difficulty of the adventure by, amongst other things. 2. Have the party exorcise the house of 2 ghosts instead of 1. For those not familiar with the adventure, the party is tasked to help one of the 3 spirits trapped inside the house. So instead, I picked 2, the Vengeful Knight, Mara Silvera, and the Bandit, Dalk Dranzorg. The party makes their way through the house, and it goes well. The ranger gets bitten by a haunted bust. The fighter accidentally wanders into the closet. The rogue eats a stale pastry. And the wizard, who doesn't believe in ghosts, believes that the haunted house was a fake funfair haunted house, and yells at the house's manager, the monster hunter, as Devanir, claiming that one of the employees attacked him. Fun times all around. My mistakes start when they go into the house's basement to exorcise Mara. My plan is to have the party start fighting Mara and have Dalk appear a few turns later to join the fight. This was a bad idea. Dalk uses the Revenant stats and has the regeneration trait, But thankfully, he'll be fighting the party, plus 2 friendly NPCs, and Mara. Though, Mara's a banshee, and on her turn, I only read the first half of the description of the whale action, only up to when the party has to make a DC 13 con throw. I forgot to read the part that says that failures result in the roller going down to 0 hit points, until after everyone rolled. So, out of the 7, how many failed the roll? It was 3. The Ranger, Wizard, and Fighter. I was going to rewind to before the Banshee wailed, but the players wanted to keep going. The 2 NPCs, the Rogue and the Ranger who was back up to 1 hit point, the latter 2 carrying the unconscious Fighter and Wizard, decided to cut their losses and run. Wanting to make the retreat interesting, I had the house start to fade away and had the 2 conscious players roll athletics. This was my second mistake. The Rogue rolled a 3 and the Ranger rolled a 0. Both players tripped and were getting grabbed by ghost hands. The party wasn't able to escape, and that's how I got my first TPK. The party loved the session, so you can say that it wasn't much of a horror story, but it was all because I fucked up. What do you think? Well, overall, while OP might have made the encounter a bit too hard for the party, in the end, it sounded like everybody had fun. And I actually read a comment on this post that sounded really cool. It said that the players could make new characters, and the DM could make it that they have to go to the house, and that their old characters would now be ghosts there as well. Here's where the DM could make the old characters fight the party, or, what I think is a much better idea, is have the old characters help the new ones complete their objective so that they can pass on and rest. It kinda gives me Fatal Frame vibes, thus why I chose that to be the background gameplay to this video. And before we get into the final story of the day, if you're enjoying the video, I hope you consider rolling a crit on that like button, as it helps the channel out more than you might think. But with that said, let's get into the story. The DM's Unquenchable Thirst for Blood by Reddit user Maladroit Mallard. I've been pretty burnt out on DnD for a while now, and focusing on other hobbies. My spouse, on the other hand, has been regularly playing a heavily homebrewed campaign DM'd by a friend's significant other, and is trying to get me to join. While I've politely declined joining their ongoing game, it turns out the DM was interested in running a consecutive vanilla campaign with a smaller group, so I decided to give it another shot. We're playing online with a party of 3, me, my spouse, and their friend, and we all start at level 3. While we did have a short session where we introduced our characters, we didn't have a proper session 0. This was a red flag for me, but I threw caution to the wind and went along without pointing this out, because my spouse assured me that this was a good DM. Now, while I enjoy combat, I prefer role-playing, keeping the fight short and snappy. So imagine my dismay when our first session started off with our characters, without having even met in game yet, immediately being attacked by the undead at a tavern that they're staying at. And it's a long slog of an encounter, 8 zombies in total, but we managed to pull through. After finally doing some role-playing to form the party, we decided to check out the most obvious source for the undead attack, the nearby graveyard. As it turns out, there's a desecrated mausoleum with a challenge that involves rotating several statues in the right positions. Unfortunately, this is not so much a puzzle as it's a trial and error battle gauntlet. No amount of investigating gives us any clues towards the solution, and anytime we make a mistake, 2 more zombies emerge from the ground that we have to fight. Eventually, we solved it and the door opens. We enter and, after climbing down some stairs, find ourselves inside our first dungeon. And inside that dungeon, we find a room with an open sarcophagus with a gleaming precious gem lying inside. We take the bait, and a ghost appears. Combat ensues, and it does not go well. At one point, the ghost uses horrifying visage. I roll badly, and my character, along with another party member, ages by 30 years. Especially bad since I'm playing an already aging Dragonborn who is now geriatric and by all logic near death. That's just D&D for you, but still a bummer. Since we're all out of healing, low on HP, and with 2 of us ready for the old folks' home, we cut our losses and abandoned the dungeon. Our plan is to rest and hopefully find a way to reverse our rapid aging. However, when we step foot outside the mausoleum, we're immediately ambushed by bandits, and the session ends on a cliffhanger before we engage. The DM is ready to disconnect, but I ask if we can do a short feedback session. They oblige, and I honestly confess that I didn't enjoy the session, feeling that it was too combat focused and the encounters were too hard. It turns out that the other two players also agree, and my spouse mentions that the other campaign is more RP heavy. The DM claims to understand our feedback and that they'll lighten up on the combat next time. We start our following session trying to negotiate with the bandits, claiming that we have nothing of value and trying to play up the sad poor old person angle. Unfortunately, despite a high persuasion roll from our rogue, the bandits are out for blood and we're fighting again. And 3 rounds later, it's TPK o'clock. At this point, I kinda lost my temper and snapped at the DM, and they responded that they'd already made the encounter easier than they originally intended. I just decided to cut my losses, and honestly state that I didn't want to play anymore and bowed out. I guess if there's a lesson here, it's that while talk to each other is still the #1 solution to most RPG horror stories, it's not a guaranteed fix. Fortunately, we'll always have solution number 2, hit the bricks. Some additional notes. The DM had the annoying habit of describing how our characters responded to situations. For example, they described the bandits threatening the party with crossbows and our characters raising their arms in response. I was curious, so I calculated the combat challenge ratings based on our party and the monsters that we encountered. Both the first combat against the zombies and the encounter with the ghosts are considered hard. Post-feedback, the encounter with the bandits, which for some reason involved 2 bandit captains, was a definitive deadly. My spouse doesn't understand what happened, since their other campaign is nowhere near this hard. They were actually kind of upset that their character died, since they spent quite some effort on their backstory. Their next session is planned for next Sunday, but was moved to 2 weeks later. I'm curious if they'll actually continue, because from what I understand, the DM and their significant other, my spouse's friend, had a big argument about this. I can understand OP being a little upset by that first session, because while I think having the party meet through a combat encounter is a really good way to set up a way for the party to come together, having 3 combat encounters at the beginning of the game to low-level characters, and without giving them a long rest between any of them, is a bit overkill. Part of me wonders if the DM was trying for a TPK after getting the feedback from the players. But maybe the reason it was so much more combat heavy than OP Spouse's other game is because the DM wanted to try something different, but made it too hard. But OP is right. If talking to the DM about why the game isn't fun for you doesn't pan out, there is always option 2. Don't stay in a game if you're not having fun. And that will do it for today. Remember, if you have a story that you would like to be featured in a video, be sure to post it to the DnD Doge subreddit, or link it in the comments. Also be sure to follow me on Twitter for more of the like and comment kitties. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may all of your rolls be natural 20s. Until next time.